tremendous sense of responsibility in relationships, oftentimes too much. If this number is present in someone's life, in all likelihood, even when they were growing up, they took too much emotional responsibility in their family of origin, even if they were a little kid. If a parent's missing, they take on the role of the parent. If there's siblings, they're the one, even if they were the littlest one and couldn't physically take care of others, in all likelihood, they felt like they should. So there's this tremendous sense of responsibility. These are the most socially oriented people. Hi, there's a space here if you want. They're the most socially oriented of all the people. Okay? It doesn't mean that they're particularly sociable, although they cannot deal with being alone. These are people that usually have very, very intense minds, very active minds. They don't do well, for example, with meditations. Meditating by themselves, that doesn't work. Meditating in a group, that works. Being with a group of people, that feels comfortable. Okay? They hate having their weaknesses revealed. It's like the father in the family. Okay? They have to take charge, and therefore, with them, they get very, very embarrassed if their flaws or seams are shown in public. Okay? They're not particularly vain people, it's just that they are very private. And regrettably, oftentimes in relationships, they will put duty over spontaneity. Strangely enough, however, therefore they can be rigid, they are also incredibly intuitive. They know what's going on, and oftentimes the conflict with sixth metal people is the fact that they have this sense of responsibility in relationships, and they think they should be doing certain things in certain ways. I tell them they should take their shoulds and stick them up their ifs. Do people get that? Hopefully? Okay? All right. It was getting too serious, so I had to say something. Okay.
Bob?
Yeah?
Are like 2, 5, and 8 on Earth, 6 and 7 in metal, and so on, are they like 6 and 7 in metal? Are there similarities in 6 and 7?
Well,
Both metal?
what you're looking at is that the 7 metal are, what I'd say is 6 metal are conventionalists, 7 metals are traditionalists. 7 metal people like things to feel a certain way. 6 metals have to have the structure of what was before. They're more concerned about it looking a certain way as opposed to feeling a certain way. Okay? That's more important. The 7 metal is more concerned with the ambiance. The 6 metal is more concerned with the structure. The structure creates security, and they can create very secure environments. They can sometimes become prisoners of them, however. Okay? In intimate relationships, these people oftentimes can feel like they are obligated to be intimate, and therefore their sexual interactions oftentimes are not spontaneous. And at the same time, if it begins to broach on being spontaneous, it begins to access their intuitive side, and sometimes they feel a little bit more vulnerable. This is good for them, but it isn't necessarily easy. Going back to 5 Earth now. Here we are. We're going to 5 now. 5 Earth, as I was saying earlier, when Shelley asked, well, I'm a 5 Earth, and this is going into a 2 Earth month, and gosh, what could be going? What's going on with Shelley is it's almost like her karmic birthday's happening. Her karmic report card has just come in, and she's having to deal with everything. Everything in her life in the last 9 years is happening this year, right? Yeah, it's pretty wild. Okay. 5 Earth people have extremes. They can feel great. They can feel horrible. You want your numbers so you can, you know where they are? Okay, great. Okay, good. Okay. They can feel fantastic one moment and depressed the next, within a matter of moments. Okay? They can be loved by people. They can be hated by people. They are people that are catalysts for change in other people's lives. They oftentimes don't know what they want. They oftentimes feel directionless. This is also true, by the way, for people that have same numbers, like 3-3 or 4-4 or 1-1. Okay? Because the 5 Earth element is, 5 Earth influence is very strong. Okay?
We just lost our air in here. Can we get some?
Do you want to sit back there, Dorcas? Why don't you do that? That way you can feel more comfortable. Okay. Am I projecting too much heat? Okay. Okay. Yeah, let's watch that. If there's too many planes going by, if that begins to be a problem, then we'll close that. Okay. These people are extremely altruistic, very giving of themselves, but they give of themselves in rather unusual ways. Oftentimes they solve people's problems in ways that the people whose problems they're solving don't even understand. Therefore, what ends up happening is that they do something, and it's probably the most appropriate thing that could possibly happen. That is a little bit too loud. Why don't we just make it so that Dorcas can just have a little bit, but it's just a little bit too loud. They will come up with probably the most appropriate thing that can be done. And yet what happens is people look at them and go, that was a horrible thing that you just did, or I don't understand why you do that, and they get discounted, okay? One of the things that I think 5 Earth people have to develop in their lives is a tremendous amount of patience, okay? It's hard, okay? These are the people that are natural-born leaders, okay? They walk into a situation, they decide they're just going to take a job and just going to sit in the background. They become very politically threatening very quickly because they think very quickly. They integrate information very well, very fast, okay? But they can also have moments when they're complete slobs, you know? Their lives are very integrated, very solid, and then complete chaos is reigning. In relationships, therefore, when you're relating to a 5 Earth person, you have to appreciate the vacillations that they go through. May have nothing to do with what's going on around them or what you did to them. May have nothing to do with that at all. These are also people that in an intimate relationship, they can be very devoted. They like domestic life, but they'd just as soon hire someone to clean their house. You know? And they really love lavishing affection on other people. In terms of sexuality, they are people that literally lavish affection on others, and they get satisfaction lavishing affection on others. They like to see other people be pleased in intimate relationships. And at the same time, they can be total hedonists. In other words, sex becomes a sport. And so you have in this person, this personality, this fluctuation that you can see in how they relate. And again, it can be very confusing to people around them. But generally speaking, they are also people that really do have a tremendous amount of heart in whatever they do. They're driven by meaning. If it's not meaningful anymore, they just soon go somewhere else. And they'll constantly push things to have meaning. And if it can't be done, well, forget it. Going now to 4 tree. The idealist, the romantic, has romantic notions about how relationships should be. Prince Charming, Princess Charming, whatever you want to call it. They have their ideals in their minds. These are people that relate to the world on the basis of ideas, generally. Okay? Lots of ideas flooding into their minds constantly. They are what are called generalists. They get the impressions of things first. When you have a 4 tree in the room, they basically feel the atmosphere and they sort of get the drift of what's going on first. Doesn't mean that they understand it all, They're not detail-oriented people. They get the general sense of it. However, what happens is because of this general sense of things, it's assumed that they know more. And therefore, people oftentimes go up to 4-tree and try and get their opinions. And what happens is the 4-tree can be very convincing. Very convincing. As they're talking to other people, what ends up happening is they mesmerize them with their eyes. They usually have very penetrating eyes. People oftentimes feel very threatened by the eyes of a 4-tree person. Why are you staring at me? I'm not staring, I'm just looking, because tree has to do with liver, has to do with eyes, has to do with bringing environment in, the light in through the eyes. So they just look. It doesn't mean that there's anything behind their look, they're just looking. That's all that's going on, okay? They do better in communication, by the way, when it's face-to-face. They don't like talking on the phone necessarily as a form of communication. It's much better for them to have face-to-face communication. All right? What goes on for these people is that they can be very convincing when they're talking to someone about something. But what happens is that they sort of like lay out this picture and everybody thanks them very much and the person goes away, whoever they were talking to. Meanwhile, what ends up happening is the thought process is still whirling around in the 4-tree's mind. And they may come to a completely different conclusion than what they conveyed to the person that just walked away from them. In which case, what ends up happening is that 2 days later, someone does something, and they go, why'd you do that? And they're going, well, because you asked me to. And you went, no, that's not what I meant at all. Okay? Because what ended up happening was they were just thinking out the process. They were just working it out. What I oftentimes tell people, 4-tree people to do in their relationships is follow through. 10 minutes later, say, now, what did I tell you? Or what did you hear from what I just said? So that they can, in fact, get it more completely. What they need to do is they are generalists and they need to spend more time developing sort of like what I call penetrating insight. They need to develop at a deeper level. In relationships, they definitely have this notion. Oftentimes what 4-tree people do is they see something, they idealize it, and then they start running a tape in their mind. And the tape in their mind may have nothing to do with the reality of the relationship that's in front of them. They want to see it go a certain way, therefore it must be going that way. Therefore they tend to stay in relationships sometimes too long because the tape is running. Best example I have in terms of 4-tree and this kind of tape mechanism is my daughter is a 4-tree 5-earth. It's an amazing combination. She's 17 years old, and boy, is her life interesting. When she was about 7 or 8 years old, she wanted to get her ears pierced. And we had been resisting and resisting and resisting until finally we said, fine, right, okay, we'll go. We went into the place where she was going to get her ears pierced, and she looked at this gun, the little staple gun that they use, to pierce the ear. She saw it, and her ears began to hurt. Just seeing it, her ears began to hurt. Her ears hurt for 2 hours. She didn't even get it done. She walked out. But what happened was, she was experiencing in her mind, the tape had already started happening. She was seeing that thing going into her ear, and that was the end of it. So her ears ached for a couple hours. And I've seen her in relationships, oftentimes wanting things to turn around the way she hopes they will, and they don't. And she knows it. We've talked about this. She idealizes in the situation. They are also, by the way, 4-tree are very tactile, very sensual people. Contact is very important. And therefore, oftentimes, they have to deal with a lot of issues around seduction. 3-tree. 3-tree is the masculine aspect of the tree element. What you look at in a 3-tree person is the most independently minded person. These are the kind of people you get involved with them, and they are intensely involved with you, but they're also intensely involved with everything else in their lives. And when they're not focusing on you, they'll focus on something else. It might not be someone else, but it could be a job, it could be exercise, it could be something else. They're just involved with it. And oftentimes what I tell people that are relating to a 3-tree person is
to realize that their intensity for you is for everything in their life. They are multi-trackers. They think constantly. They have all sorts of things going on in their minds all the time. And they can integrate it relatively well. Okay? These are people that talk as they think. They pull out things from the environment. It's almost like they don't need prompts, as opposed to the 5 Earth person in their communication who is integrating what they already know. The 3 tree just comes up with ideas that come out of the middle of nowhere. Sometimes they're very sane, and sometimes they're just not grounded in anything. They're just like an interesting idea. These are people that like ideas just for ideas' sake, just like to think. You know, they are people that do not get bored with life. You could drop them off in the middle of the ocean somewhere on a dinghy, and they could just float around, and that would be perfectly fine. And independence is the theme in a relationship. If they are in a relationship where people do not appreciate their need for independence, it is horrible. They will struggle against it. Because they really need that. They need someone that really respects that side. They are extremely vain people. I know, because I'm a 3 tree. Doesn't necessarily mean that I always dress immaculately, but I'm always aware of what I look like in relation to the people that I'm with. Okay? So I can be a complete slob, but I'm aware of being my slobness around the people that I'm with. Okay? As opposed to the 7 metal that really couldn't handle that all that well. Okay? But they're very vain. They're also usually very dynamic. They fill space. Oftentimes people complain of 3 tree that they're not giving anybody any space because they walk into a room and they just fill the space. It doesn't mean that they are trying to suck energy from everything. It just means that they go in and they expand. You really walk into a room and you're having a conversation with them. 20 minutes later, 2 days later, you can talk to them and they will have remembered every detail in that room. Not only the conversation that they had, but they'll remember every single detail that was going on around them. You know, where the closets were, where the windows were, where the lights were, which lights were on. All those things will be there for them. And they are people that, although they can be very daunting in their physical presence, the image in the I Ching is that of the dragon. And dragons, other than being very vain, do not like to be threatened. They can convey a very strong persona. But if they're physically threatened, they will curl up into their lair and hide. They don't want to be threatened. They just want to be left alone then. It's not that they're cowards. It's just that, you know, although I think I'm a coward. I've definitely been a coward in my life. Okay? But literally the whole idea of being physically threatened, they just don't want to deal with it. The minute they hit something that really is resisting, it's okay, fine. I don't have to have, it's fine. Just step back. Okay?
What's your child number, Bob?
9.
How does that interact with 3?
Well, right now what I want to do is let me finish all the rest of these numbers, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on that. We'll go until 10:30 because we had to start at 9:15, so those people can just wait, you know, when they come to the door. 2 Earth, primal mother number. These are people that are extremely caring. They are concerned about the feelings of the people around them. These people have larger phone bills usually than other people because people want to talk to 2 Earth people. They feel nurtured by them. They feel cared by them. Okay? They can become the most codependent people. Okay? Get overly involved in the lives of other people. They can do that. These are people that on a basic level feel a certain sense of sadness about the world. They are like the whole idea of Mother Earth. They see what's going around them and it ravages them. And they feel very deeply hurt. There's a kind of, their spirituality, they talk about what's called, in Buddhist tradition, they talk about the genuine heart of sadness. And that's a sign of a true warrior, is having a genuine heart of sadness. And 2 Earth people have that genuine heart of sadness. Okay? What happens oftentimes with 2 Earth people in order to push away how intense that feeling can be is that they'll try and be busy. They'll try and busy themselves. Or they'll try and act as if they don't care. They'll try and be glib about certain things, but really they're not. They're extremely sensitive people. These are the kind of people that if they have a party at their house, they're considered to be somewhat superficial, but it's actually not so. What happens with Two Earth aspect is that they will go and they'll make sure that everybody's got food and drink, and they're conversing with everybody, finding out how everyone is. And at the end of the night, what ends up happening is, if someone asks, well, what about so-and-so, meaning the Two Earth person, they'll go, well, we just had a very brief conversation. I really didn't learn anything about what's going on with that person. If you ask the Two Earth person what was going on, they were able to observe and pick up on everything that was going on in that room. Okay? They're not very organization conscious, but they really pick up, they're atmospheric. They pick up atmospheres. Okay? These are also people in relationships, by the way, that find themselves oftentimes, especially in sexual relationships, fulfilling their sexual role. That oftentimes they have a difficulty because their whole mode of being is that in sexuality, nurturing is a very important aspect of sexuality for them. Consequently, it's going to be that even if they do not feel nurtured themselves, oftentimes that they feel that their sexual involvement with someone will nurture the other person, they will perform. Okay? And again, this can create a tremendous sense of sadness because there's a lot of, and what will end up happening as a result, it'll cause a tremendous amount of, I'm trying to think of the word, resentment. These people, generally in their lives, they can be very, very self-sacrificing. But if they're not appreciated for what they're doing, or if it goes too far in terms of like bankrupting them, they can become extremely resentful. And you do not want to get the vindictiveness of a Two Earth person. And they will literally go for the jugular. Okay? One water people. These are people that oftentimes, in relationships, they like to feel independent. They like to do things alone, but they do not like to do things in isolation. A one-water person would just as soon do something by themselves in one room and know that someone else is on the other side of the house. If they're by themselves, it bothers them. Okay? They like to know other people are there. But they don't like to share everything that's going on. I describe water as like if you look at a vessel in water, the vessel defines the water, the shape of the water, but it never becomes the water. And in a relationship with a water person, oftentimes what you find is that you're just creating a context. And the person can feel very comfortable in that and really very loving, but at the same time, there's a quality that's there that is somewhat detached. They're very deep-thinking people. They share very few of their intimate thoughts. They tend to be rather enigmatic in their relationships. People always want to be on the good side of a one-water person because you don't know really what they're thinking. If you ask them a question, expect to wait a few days for an answer. You never push the water. There's no point. You ask them, and what ends up happening is you just let it go. My wife is a double one water. I usually wait 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 weeks for a response to questions. I just know that that's what has to happen. Melanie, what do you think about? And don't have to answer me now. Just, whenever you have time. Because what ends up happening is if you push a one water to answer, they'll give you any answer just to get you off their back. That's what they will do. They'll just respond. Okay? It doesn't mean that they mean it. It just is a way of pushing you away. Okay? But if you ask them later on and you suddenly get an answer that's at a much deeper level, these are very, very philosophical people. Okay? In their relationships, they oftentimes understand the undercurrents of what's going on in relationships, what's going on around them. In intimacy, what I would say is if people have ever heard, especially if you're around macrobiotics long enough, you hear about Tantra, you hear about sacred sexuality. These are people that are more aligned to that way of being. Sexuality and spirituality are very intimately connected. And sexuality becomes, in fact, a vehicle for them to understand their spiritual nature. And that's actually what they're looking for in a relationship. You could say, well, that's what everybody's looking for, is to feel like a deeper union with everybody, okay, when you're in a relationship. But really, this is extremely important to these people. And if they don't receive that, then they can just be they can be like gigolos. They can just just be very cavalier about their sexuality. Now, yeah.
If you have like one member from your year and another one,
Yeah.
they modify each other?
That's right. It depends on the circumstances. That's what we're going to do in the last 10 minutes that we have, okay, is looking at how they combine, okay? You can definitely have a situation where you have someone that is very relationship-oriented, family-oriented person, okay, very serving and nurturing in a relationship, who also has a 3 tree, which is extremely independent, and needs to have a lot of personal expression in their lives, and is going to be a lot more physical, and tactilely oriented, and need that tactile stimulation. 3 tree people oftentimes scream to be hugged, okay? The 2 earth person isn't necessarily that way. They just seem lavish on someone else, but sometimes 3 tree people can be so desperate. So here you have the situation. Someone that's very nurturing, and someone can be very desperate at the same time. Someone that can be very, very self-sacrificing in the relationship, and then not give a damn at other moments. And are you going to go to a therapist for that? I mean, that's very interesting. What ends up happening is, but my experience with people that have gone through a lot of therapy is, what good therapy should do after about $15,000 or $20,000 is tell you what you already know about yourself. Or you're discovering basically these things that you're nurturing at the same time, don't give a damn at times. You learn that. You learn about the paradoxes in your life. And you don't try to be consistent, okay? And it's going to be definitely depending on the year, depending on the month. Certain things are going to be noticeable. There's certain times when this 2 or 3 tree combination, they just need to get out of the house. There they were taking care of everything, making sure the kids were fed, making sure that, the husband or the boyfriend was going off to work, whatever. And then what ends up happening is they go, I'm going away for a month. What? Yeah, I need to get away. Because that's what's necessary. Okay? And it continues to change. The idea literally is that, what makes a relationship work? And if we're talking about relationship, for one thing, that's in relation to ourselves. Just understanding that inside ourselves, that's who we are. We can be a 6 metal and a 9 fire. Okay? And the 6 metal person, very strong definitions as to how things are, and the 9 fire, a tremendous amount of romanticism. Okay? Needing to express everything, and the 6 metal saying, keep everything down and appropriate. And some months you're really appropriate, and some months you're not appropriate at all. Is this a character flaw? Or are you just basically playing the dance of elements?
Then do you end up, you start using those things as excuses for things that
Well, everything can be used as an excuse. My idea of it is literally that if you know that that's what's used, how do you use something responsibly? It's like a credit card. How do you use it responsibly? Once you know that this is true, the thing that normally gets us in relationships or in relationship to ourselves is that we're resisting what's true. This whole notion of self-acceptance. The thing that I've experienced with people that are self-actualized is that they are no longer apologizing for who they are. I have this one friend, it's great, he's done extensive amount of spiritual practice. And in the beginning when I knew him, he's this guy that's extremely money-oriented. Amazing guy, always making deals. And it was always painful to be around him, okay? Really painful because everything seemed like it was going into this, hustle, okay? Now he's done a lot of retreat and a lot of accepting himself, and now he hustles, but it's kind of a joke. He knows it's a joke. He's more at ease with it. I can say, you're being an ass. And he'll go, yeah, I know. It's like, he can accept it more, okay? You just know that there's certain tendencies that you have, and you don't have to fight it, And then it becomes more workable. You don't use it as, well, this is the way I am because I'm a 6 metal. And in fact, that was what happened in the beginning of macrobiotics. And Bill Tyler and I have talked about this. You used to see the old East-West Journal, and it would see 6 metal looking for a 1 water woman. You know, because 6 metal is supposed to support 1 water. You know. And what Bill said was that some of the worst marriages he ever saw were based on 9-star key. Okay? Now, the thing I would say this about relationships is what makes relationships work is when people want to work relationships. Doesn't matter what sign you are. Doesn't matter what element you are. There are control elements in here. There are laws of support. Okay? So, does anybody want to give me a relationship that I can just play with?
3 tree and 7 metal.
What do you think? 3 trees. All right. 7-1 is you. Is that right?
And I'm 5.
You're 5-1 and 7-1. All right. Let's just use them as an example. Okay. So it's Marty. So you're 7-1. Now I'll show you how I do it when I'm doing a relationship. Okay. So here we have Marty. Marty is a 7 metal. So I put Marty in capital letters here. Okay. That means he's a 7 here. And Marty, you're a small 1. You're a 1 child. Okay. So I'm going to use Marty here in small letters. Okay. Okay, and it's Shelley, is that what your name? Shelley, go. You're 5, and what else?
5, 1.
You're 5-1. Okay, so here's Shelley. And here's Shelley. Okay? All right. So, the large is the adult. This one in brackets in small is the child. Okay. So let's look at some real simple things.
Is the child the second or third number?
The child is the second number.
Okay.
The child is.
And what's the third?
The third number is the house that the child sits in the book. Okay? Now, what's going on is this. In this relationship between Marty and Shelley, okay, Marty feels supported because in terms of the law of supports, okay, earth element supports metal element, okay? Earth element supports metal element. So what's happening is that Shelley naturally supports Marty, okay? Who supports Shelley? Okay? Or would be someone that would have fire energy. Okay? So oftentimes in this situation, that which would nurture the self-actualizing potential of Shelley, she doesn't necessarily feel in the relationship. Okay? Now that isn't necessarily bad. What can mean is literally in Shelley's life as a 5 earth person with a lot of altruism and a lot of good heart, it's quite possible that she feels most fulfilled in supporting Marty in what he does. Okay? That brings her greatest joy, in which case, just because she doesn't necessarily feel support from him may not be a negative aspect of the relationship. If she is feeling like she needs to have support, then what they need to look at is how can they create more fire in their relationship to support Shelley. In the book, what I describe is that there are certain kind of archetypal principles that you can use. There are totem animals, there are colors, there are atmospheres that you can create that can put a lot of fire into a situation so that Shelley can feel that. And that what Marty can do is actually learn some of what the traits of 9 fire are. What are the skills? They aren't necessarily going to be dominant traits that he has. But for example, 9 fire people oftentimes, just to me, as opposed to the 7 metal who is always wanting to make sure that they're saying the right thing and not wanting to rock the boat, the 9 fire person might have to be a little bit more blunt about what they want, okay? Or ask, what do you need? In a way that makes it feel like there's fire, some willingness to try to communicate and get Shelley to open up, okay? So that might be what's necessary. I don't know, okay? But that is the element that's going to be necessary. Now, in the relationship also, what you've got is this. Both of them, here we have Marty. Shelley supports Marty, and Marty supports these two. So this is the element of support. Now, what this means is there can be this tendency for both of them to lapse into great moments of silence. Okay? Where suddenly a lot of the deeper feelings that they have for each other or things that are going on in their lives because of this support network here makes it so that there are a lot of deep underlying things that are going on. And there could be a lot of silence about that. Okay? There could even be some fear about communicating those things. Suddenly, they're feeling really good. She's nurturing. He's feeling very easygoing and outward going. And then suddenly what ends up happening is they get to one of those pregnant pauses where everything gets really silent and no one knows what to do with it. Does that make sense? Okay? She's smiling with her lips.
Down to a T.
Okay? All right? In which case, what ends up happening? Now, what we're looking at is that this is another law, and again, we can't necessarily describe all the laws in Oriental medicine, but there's what's called the law of control. Earth controls water. Earth absorbs water. Okay? So in this situation, what ends up happening is, this is adult. This is Shelley's adult. Shelley, by the way, is very self-controlled. Okay? Okay? Marty tends to lapse into quiet. Shelley tends to feel quiet, but at the same time resist it. And she actually is much harder on herself than anybody else could possibly be. Okay? She's very self-critical. Okay? What can happen is that when this silence happens, she can get really sarcastic or real cynical. What's going on? And really try and stir something up. And you're going, and Marty's going, is because his adult supports his child, goes, what, I thought everything was fine. You know, this is not just, you know, one of those things of dumb male, okay? This is what we're looking at, is we're looking at just elements, okay? Okay, like in terms of the male that has no emotional expression, what you're looking at is someone who feels very deeply, but at the same time is rather enigmatic or vague about these things unless really asked and given time to express. But what ends up happening is that Shelley sometimes gets impatient with herself about what she's not expressing, and at the same time may get to Marty in the same way. Why aren't you telling me? And really what it's about is Shelley's not telling herself what she's wanting to. She's not revealing herself either. She may have all these underlying things that she's never really said because this 5 Earth is saying, I've got to be nurturing. These are thoughts that I'm having, but at the same time, this is how it should be, you know? And so consequently, there's this pressure that's here. Now, how do you work with this? Well, again, one of the best things is looking at the element of fire. The element of fire is, if this happens in your life, have a room where you normally have conversations or where you want to resolve things. Maybe it's a bedroom, maybe it's a den, or someplace in your house where you have things that relate to fire element. Okay? Sit down, light some candles in a room, have an atmosphere that is very warm and supportive, and literally just sit down and talk. What that'll do is it'll ease up the pressure. It'll begin to nurture this. It'll satisfy this. And what it'll also do is it'll begin to break the cycle. Okay? But that's one of the things that has to happen. These are the 2 elements that are missing in the relationship. These 2. Okay? Expression of ideas. Just taking time just to... and that's another aspect of this, by the way. This is 7 metal, again, can be very... what you're looking at is the whole idea of feeling... satisfied in the comfort of things, okay? And 5 Earth likes the comfort of home as well. So this is kind of like homey nest. And sometimes what happens is you may need time just to get away. Both of you may have to do it independently at times as well. Okay? Is literally just go and have things that are very independent for both of you as a way of generating ideas that you can then bring into the relationship. Okay? And again, what we're looking at is, and when people hear this, it's like, no, we're not saying that, you should live in separate homes or move across the country and be away from each other. The idea is, how do you begin to look at elements and begin to incorporate these into your lifestyle as a couple? How do you do that? Okay?
What is like metal, like, a metal, does that have anything, how do they get, the words, does it like, metal is like hard, earth?
Metal has to do with also the word is air. What you're looking at is that metal is in fact the most condensed aspect of nature, like iron and different metals in the earth, okay? The idea is it's fully matured. It's like when something, in terms of the element of air, when something is fully mature as a plant, it is taking up as much oxygen as it can possibly take in. And then it begins to break down. So there's a quality of maturation. There's a quality of 7 metal people oftentimes feel entitled to the world being right. Okay? Things should just go a certain way and things are going to work out. 5 Earth is going, well, sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't, and we better work on it. And 7 metal and 1 water will go, well, let's just wait and see. It'll happen. Much more relaxed about it. So your challenge in this is literally having it so that having this satisfied, having this nurtured. Okay? We've come to the end of time. We haven't come to the end of time exactly, but we've come to the end of this time. I want to thank you all for coming. I'll also say that I am available. The book is in the shop. The book is designed, by the way, to really help you to understand how to work. A nine-star key is not an elaborate system of astrology. It's one of the deepest ones I've seen, but at the same time, it's not complicated to work out. So in the first chapter, literally what I described is exactly how to work the whole system. And then also, if you want, I do consultations, and you can book them upstairs. Okay, and thank you all.